Hello everyone! Rocket Wayne is back to join you for another amazing venture as we read Bunnicula and the Howliday Inn. Always remember that as we go through these amazing stories and read these outstanding adventures, all you have to do is press the CC button in your YouTube link to be able to follow along with the words. Now I made a friend while I was here, and it's Northstar. Northstar is going to join us for my last time reading this amazing adventure. Now that Northstar is here, let's jump in. Bunnicula and the Howliday Inn. Chapter 3. An Uneasy Calm. I awakened to the sound of rain pelting on the roof above me. As my eyes began to focus, I found myself staring at the words, "A bow wow breakfast." A moment of confusion, I realized I was reading the side of my new food dish. What I saw when I raised my head a little was not what I personally would have described as a bow wow anything. My dish was heaped with some sort of gray gruel that was rivaled in dreariness only on the day on the outside. Perhaps Chester had it right after all. "Chester," I called over the patter of the falling rain. "Chester, are you there?" "Of course I'm here," he answered curiously. "Where'd you think I was going on a day like this? Out on the golf course? Perfecting my putt?" "How did you sleep?" I asked, ignoring his early morning grumpiness. By this time in our lives, I was used to it. "Oh, fine. Why should I let the incessant howling werewolves disturb my slumber?" I didn't take up the issue of werewolves with Chester just then, because I'd finished eating my breakfast and discovered the words, "Have a nice day," written at the bottom of the dish. "Chester, does your dish? If you're going to ask me to discuss the attack of cutes this place is suffering from, I refuse," Chester grumbled. If I wanted my fortune told every time I ate, I could have gone to a Chinese restaurant. And with that, he let out a great sigh and went back to sleep. I could tell that any further attempts at conversation would prove futile, so I fell back asleep too, waiting for something else to happen, and wishing I were back home. By the time I woke again, the rain had stopped, and something else I'd been waiting for was about to happen. Harrison and Joe were going from bungalow to bungalow, opening the door. "Okay, animals, let's go," Harrison was saying in a bored sort of way. "Exercise time." "Thank goodness it stopped raining," Joe called out. "I thought I was going to go crazy spending another minute working on all those charts." "There's still the office to clean," Harrison said. "And the storage shed." "Harrison," Joe replied, "we don't have to do it all today." "Oh yes we do," Harrison answered with urgency. Joe put her hands on her hips and looked at Harrison with wonder. "You're really something, you know that, Harrison?" "Am I? Gee, thanks. Didn't mean it as a compliment." "Oh. I mean, you blow hot and cold. Like yesterday, all you wanted to do was lie around and read comic books all day. Today, you can't stop working. You're driving me crazy. What's with you anyway?" "Who knows," Harrison replied. "Maybe I'm getting ambitious. You'd like that, wouldn't you?" He smiled in Jill's direction, revealing the remnants of morning breakfast neatly lodged between his two front teeth. In disgust, Jill turned away and poked her head inside my door. "Good morning, Harold," she murmured softly. "I hope you had a good sleep at your first night at Chateau Bow Wow." I allowed myself to be coaxed out into the muddy outdoors. It wasn't too thrilled with the conditions of the ground, but was happy to have the chance to stretch my legs and move about. "Where's that storage shed anyway?" Jill asked, after a moment, continuing her conversation with Harrison as she unlocked Chester's door. "Out back," Harrison answered, pointing to the far corner of the compound, "right outside the fence near Howard's bungalow." "But there's no entrance from here. You have to go through the outside wall," Harrison went on. "That's why it's a pain to clean." Ugh, Jill groaned. "That's too bad," she said, picking up Chester and stroking him. Chester's face looked like a car accident. Obviously, he had not slept well at all. "Well, I guess we better get to it." "Aren't you forgetting something?" Harrison asked. Jill looked blankly around her, then quizzically at Harrison. "Lyle," Harrison said simply. "You didn't let him out of his bungalow." Jill shook her head slowly. "Oh, of course," she said at last. "I guess I'm just getting so used to Lyle getting out by himself, it doesn't even occur to me to unlock his door anymore." I watched as she opened Lyle's door and then walked to the gate, tripping over a small rock that was in her path. Watching her, Chester dropped his head and moaned. "All right, everybody," Harrison let out. "Hurry up and enjoy yourselves before it starts raining again." And then he went to the front gate, carefully locking it after him. Chester and I looked back to discover Max bounding spiritedly in our direction. With his natty turtleneck sweater and his square shoulders and jaw, he resembled the captain of a college football team. I remarked on my observation to Chester, whose only response was a rhythmic arrhythmia, yeah team, rah, rah, rah." Then he added, "If he says anything athletic, I'll scream." Max stopped abruptly before us. "Want to jog?" he blurted out. True to his word, Chester let out a blood-curdling screech and immediately turned his heels. Max appeared to take it in stride. "I'm Max," he said. "I'm Harold," I replied politely. "And this is, that was Chester." I had introducing Max to Chester's retreating hindside. "Pleased to meet both of you," Max said with a nod to Chester's tail. He returned his gaze to me. "So, Harold, you want to jog?" I remember that one time I tried jogging with Pete and Mr. Monroe and had to be carried back home on the back of Pete's bike. "Oh, well, no, not really. I stated empathetically. "Helps work out your aggression," Max muttered. "I don't have any aggressions," I said honestly. Max seemed disappointed. "So you don't jog, eh?" he asked a little sadly. "No," I told him again, disappointed that he was disappointed. "Well then, now's the time to start, come on." I could see that Max was not going to be a pushover. I, on the other hand, was always and have been a pushover. So before I could say anything, I found myself trotting behind, somewhat breathlessly, alongside Max. "The thing is," Max said after a moment, "you have to get your exercise when you can around here. They only let us out for a few hours in the afternoon. Of course," and he looked around him before he continued, "it's easy to unlock the doors from the inside. Anyone can do it. Harold, even you." "Oh, thanks," I said, or at least I think that's what I said. I was having trouble getting out my words and breathing at the same time. In a burst, I asked, "Do the others know about getting out?" "Oh, sure. Everyone knows how to do it. I'll show you later. Lyle's the only one dumb enough to do it when Harrison and Jill are around. The rest of us wait until supper when they're done and gone home." Suddenly, Max called out, "Taxi! Taxi!" I thought he'd completely flipped. Max," I said, "I'm not sure how to tell you this, but I don't think there's a cab for miles and miles. Besides," I went on, wheezes, "if we're getting tired, we don't have to keep stride. We could just stop running." "You don't understand," he said without once stopping to catch his breath. "I'm not calling a taxi, I'm calling taxi." And I glanced over to see one of the oldest looking dogs I'd ever encountered wadding frantically in our direction. "What kind of dog is this?" I asked. "Who knows," Max replied. "I don't think poor Taxi himself knows for sure. He's part of everything, I guess. He's a good mutt, though. A little on the slow side, if you get my drift. And he tends to something of a cleaning vine. But, what do you mean?" I asked. "I don't know what it is, but some days he sticks to me on a glue. Seems to think the sun rises and sets around me," Max said, without apparent displeasure. Taxi joined us then. Falling into step beside Max, he regarded Max with a look that was 1 degree away from idol and worship. I could see what Max had meant. "Hi, Max," he said. "Hey, Taxi, how are you doing?" he replied, gruffly. "Taxi, I want you to meet Harold." Taxi nodded absently in my direction. "How are you feeling today, Max?" he asked. Not bad, Taxi," I said. "I want you to meet Harold." Once again, Taxi nodded his head in a vague sort of way, not really acknowledging my presence. Of course, at that moment, I was wondering how much longer it would be before my presence became my past. I could barely catch my breath, and my tongue was hanging somewhere around my knees. "Had enough?" asked Max, brimming with energy. I guess you have. Come on, let's head for the cooler and have a break." At the community water cooler, my breathing returned to normal, and Taxi noticed me at last. "Oh, hello," he said, as if seeing me for the first time. "Who are you?" "I'm Harold," I replied. Harold, he said, a puzzled look on his face. "Where have I heard that name before?" "I just introduced you," said Max. "Oh!" I looked at Taxi. Max was right. He was really on the slow side. "Are you okay, Max? You're really feeling all right?" Taxi asked. Sure, Max snapped, a little irritably. "Why do you keep asking?" "Well, after that fight last night, "Oh, that," Max answered. Tax and I looked around at Max as his face grew red beneath his hair. When he returned to our gaze, he looked a little embarrassed and not just a little angry. "Ah, women," he uttered. "What a nuisance they are sometimes. That Louise can be so unreasonable." I glanced over at Louise's bungalow and saw that she was watching us. I felt a little sorry for her. Max went on. "Just because Georgette and I have said hello a few times, she thinks we're going to run off together." He looked around him and then added in a low voice, as if we could ever get out of here even if we wanted to. Taxi nodded his head in sympathy. He looked up at Max with wide eyes and sighed deeply. "It must be pretty hard sometimes," he said. "Yep," Max grunted. "Women. Sometimes I think we'd be better off without them." There was a moment of silence. All at once, Taxi's face lit up. "Oh, Max," he said excitedly, "you just reminded me of this television show I saw last week. The man just said what you just did." "Said what?" Max asked. "Women," Sometimes I think we'd be better off without him, Taxi repeated. And then what did he say, Max answered. Nothing. He murdered his wife. I looked at Taxi. He looked at Max. Max stared straight ahead in the direction of Luis's bungalow. That's terrible, he said softly. Taxi just shrugged his shoulders and began drinking water again. He looked up after a moment, water dripping from his lips, and said, I don't think so. I looked at him in surprise. How can you say such an awful thing, I asked. Oh, I wouldn't, Taxi said. But you just did. Did what? Say such a thing. Did I? I was getting confused. Yes, of course you did. You just said it wasn't such a terrible thing for a man to murder his wife. Oh, Taxi said, thinking it all over. I guess I might have meant it then. I could definitely see holding a conversation with Taxi was definitely going to be a challenge. She wasn't a very nice person, Taxi added, as if that made everything okay. Still, there's no reason, I started to say when Max cut me off. How did he do it? He asked suddenly, turning his gaze from Luis's bungalow to Taxi. Poison, Taxi said simply, and then, in her soup. Was Max's only reply. I observed him for a moment. He must have noticed me and then laughed suddenly and said, well, that's one way of handling women, I suppose. I suppose, I replied. Not all sure I like being part of the conversation. Yes, Max went on thoughtfully. Murder is one way. Murder in its infinite varieties. Poison, stabbing, drowning, strangling. Split pea, Taxi interjected. Max and I looked up. He put poison in her split pea soup, he explained. Oh, I said. Ah, said Max. Yoo-hoo, called a new voice. We all turned to see a tiny white French poodle standing a few feet away. Georgette, Max whispered. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Georgette cooed as she approached the water cooler. She smelled of honeysuckle and magnolias. She also smelled of trouble. How you doing after that terrible fight? I felt so awful bad about it. I couldn't sleep a wink all night worrying about you. And here she yawned, showing us, I gathered, how she had suffered on Max's account. I don't believe a word of it, Taxi whispered to me. Max started pawing the ground self-consciously. Oh, shucks, he said at last. I'm fine today. Thanks for asking. Oh, don't be silly, Georgette replied. What is? Max asked, grinning openly now. Thanking me for caring about you, Georgette answered. Oh, shucks, Max said again. It struck me that when Georgette came around, Max's vocabulary suffered. It was right then I noticed Luis had joined us. Oh, shucks. Ha! She explained. Ah, shucks, said Monsieur Max. I come over here to tell you that I am, how you say, sorry that we have had our little fight. And what do I hear? Ah, shucks. Well, mon ami, is this what you will say when I am no longer around? Eh? Ah, shucks. Because if you are keeping up with this much longer, with Hester Prynne here. Georgette said softly. Georgette Hester, what am I carrying? If you think you can have your little Louise and Mademoiselle all shucks too, you are sadly misshapen. I think she meant to say mistaken, but she was overwrought at this point. It was understandable that the word came out wrong. I wanted to console her, but she left us with a grand flourish before everyone, including Max, could speak. Just as she was about to reach her bungalow, Lyle suddenly pounced on her back. Bombs away, he cried. Louise screamed, what are you doing? You are a very crazy little cat. You naughty Lyle, you. Get off me this instant. Lyle didn't seem to be paying attention to Louise's scream. In fact, it appeared that he was talking to someone else entirely. Ace 1 to 4-7, come in. Have bombed the target area. Meeting resistance. Roger. Over and out. Max ran over to Louise to help. Lyle, he commanded. Stop this at once. Don't you be helping me, Louise cried. I will take care of it myself. Merci you very much. Max backed off, tucking himself far into his sweater as possible. Louise turned her head around so that she was staring directly into Lyle's eyes. Lyle mumbled underneath his breath as if talking into a hymn-set. Enemy contact, stand by, mayday, mayday. I adore this cat. Now you listen to me, Louise said in a low, threatening tone. Lyle's eyes went wild and he stopped talking immediately. We all know about you here. Do not think we are playing the fools. You are driving us all, as you say, pineapples. I think she means to say bananas, Georgette whispered across the way to no one in particular. But I, for once, have had enough. Do you understand me, Monsieur Lyle? Enough pineapples you have driven me. You will not make me into a fruit salad. N'est-ce pas? Now get off my back and do not ever use me as a landing stripe again. Lyle hissed at her and jumped off her back. He dashed to the other side of the compound and then he turned suddenly to face her. You haven't seen the end of me, Toots, he shouted. No one talks to Lyle like that and gets away with it. You're not frightening me, Monsieur bombs away, Luis yipped. Then there was a crash of thunder which shook us all. No one spoke for a few seconds. Then came a deep, rumbling sound. I thought it was more thunder, then I realized it was coming from Lyle's direction. I looked at him. He was growling at Luis. From somewhere deep in his throat, he said, I don't like being crossed, sister. Just watch out. He stared at her coldly, and Luis, momentarily stunned, stared back. She looked frightened, and I wondered for the first time if indeed there was a reason for her to be. Well, that is a very interesting place to end today's story. But I think I hear a superhero. Thank you, North Star. I hope to see you again, my friend. And I hope to see you again, my friend, here on Wayne Reads. But seeing as a superhero is coming, I must take off. Bye-bye, Rocket Wayne. Away!